We Unitarian Universalists are a community of communities, living in covenant with each other, fulfilling our mission in the world, and working to build the beloved community. I join you this morning in extending a welcome to your new members. May you enjoy your time with this congregation and find meaning in your time together. Now, given that we are dealing with this global coronavirus pandemic, we cannot assemble without acknowledging the weight of this moment that we are in. The context of our lives have changed. I want to share with you a reading that was written by Black Elk, a Native American elder. The piece is entitled "The Sacred Hoop." Then I was standing on the highest mountain of them all, and round beneath me was the whole hoop of the world. And while I stood there, I saw more than I can tell, and I understood more than I saw. For I was seeing in the sacred manner the shape of all things of the Spirit, and the shapes as they must live together like one being. And I saw that the sacred hoop of my people was one of many hoops that make one circle. Wide as daylight and starlight, and in the center grew one mighty flowering tree to shelter all the children. And I saw that it was holy. End of reading. We co-create our understanding of the world. With our words, we help to define reality. Many people probably take for granted that our greetings set the ground for our relationships and our intentions. Hawaiian author Rosa Say describes aloha as, quote, a value, one of unconditional love. Aloha is the outpouring and the receiving of the Spirit, end of quote. Unitarian Universalist minister Reverend Patrick O'Neill wrote about the way that the great warriors of the Maasai people in Kenya, Africa, traditionally greet each other. Now, people living on the mainland in the United States typically greet each other by saying hello or hi, how are you? And in response, the person says, I'm fine, how are you? In Kenya, the Maasai warrior traditionally greets one another by saying in their own language, how are the children? And the other replies, the children are fine. Whether or not the greeters have children, the greeting and the reply are the same because they know that they are not being asked to assess their own well-being. They know that their well-being is connected to the well-being of the wider community, to the well-being of those who are vulnerable, and the well-being of the next generations. For the Maasai, or for any society, if the children are not fine, then the society is not fine, no matter how well it might look to some on the surface. This understanding of interrelatedness is at the heart of what it means to be a community of communities. And you can hear it in Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s prophetic words when he said, we are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality. tied in a single garment of destiny, end quote. In the face of this pandemic, we must be, and we are asking, how are the children? How are the grandparents, the elders, and the seniors? How are those with pre-existing conditions? How are the children, families, and people detained at the border? How are the homeless? How are the incarcerated and their families? How are the caregivers in medical establishments and residential facilities? How are the people who keep the food industry and the transportation industry going? How are the first responders? And the list goes on and on. This global health crisis has both expanded our perspective and shrunken the world at the same time. We want to know, and we need to know, how people are doing even thousands of miles away in countries around the world. In the reading, Black Elk said, "Then I was standing on the highest mountain of them all, and around beneath me was the whole hoop of the world. And while I stood there, I saw more than I can tell, and I understood more than I saw, and I saw that the sacred hoop of my people was one of many hoops that make one circle," end quote. He describes the community of communities. And to understand it, we have to be above our own concerns to really see how we are interconnected with other people and how we are all a part of the web of life. There has been nothing in my lifetime, and I imagine for many, if not most of you, that has done a better job than the spread of the coronavirus of making us realize our connections. Our day-to-day lives have been interrupted by the need for social distancing, for managing our resources, for taking care of each other, for staying connected, and for keeping our lives going, basically for staying alive during this time. We don't know when we will be back in our church buildings together, but we can keep building church. We are already adapting in ways that are certain to change how we will operate in the future. So let's work now to reconstitute ourselves as a community of communities. This is the perfect moment. And as I talk more and more about the community of communities, it has me asking, so what's the big deal? Why is this a big deal or an issue? And yet, it often feels like this is a new conversation, because so often we think of and we speak of church as family. Now, this is not to critique or criticize, but to expand our view. Identifying church as a family has worked for us for a very long time, but it actually limits the vision of who we are and who we can become. No doubt family is important in our lives, and some of us experience church as family, especially as we move from state to state. And family is a nice sentiment for being together, but it's overused. I am asking that we, Unitarian Universalists across the country, across the globe, make a shift in our identity from seeing church as a family to seeing church as a community of communities. So here are some things to think about when looking at the church as a family. All families have structure and often a pecking order. There's a narrow lineage and everyone knows where the authority is. Furthermore, whether it's spoken or unspoken, we all know who we can bring home and who we can't. Now think about that when it comes to pluralism, to diversity, equity, and growth. If we can change this aspect of our identity and see ourselves as a community of communities, we will change our culture over time and create new possibilities for our own faith as individuals and collective, as well as growth and diversity of our movement and our effectiveness in the wider world. Family is a metaphor with the power to shape our identity, our structures, our relationships to one another, and our relationships with the wider world. Seeing ourselves as a community of communities better reflects today's reality. A community is invested in the well-being of the individual members as well as the collective. And one thing that I find very exciting about communities is that they have the potential to grow themselves. This I know from experience, and I imagine that many of you do too. Individuals within the community can feel a sense of belonging, shared identity, safety, and empowerment. And that might translate into a greater sense of wanting to bring others into that circle. It is in our best interest to nurture and support communities. We live in a society that is constructed to affirm individualism. The community of communities moves us from I or me-centeredness to we-centeredness. And by this, I mean that we're not just concerned about what is comfortable for us individually, but we're learning how to look out for each other and to collaborate and to create environments where everyone can belong, where there are multiple stories and where our gifts and ministries can be shared. Unitarian Universalism is a big tent theology, but we use family, a little tent metaphor, to say who we are. And this is not just an issue for us, but for churches in general. I believe that the family metaphor is part of the reason that 11 o'clock on Sunday is said to be the most segregated hour in this country. Think about that. Family metaphor has historic and pervasive impact on how we do church community, on how we do inclusion, and whether or not we actually build the diverse, beloved community, which our principles call us to do. But we have not yet designed our churches to fulfill this potential, to do the sacred work of building beloved community. For example, let's say that you want to build a place to live. If the blueprint that you use is for a houseboat, now you might have a place to live, but it might not be the house that you wanted. We need a different design than the traditional church design to build the beloved community. And the community of communities will help us to do that. Now, the eighth principle is an important piece of the beloved community design. I want to thank those of you in Honolulu at the UU Church for helping to lead the way, for being the second congregation to actually adopt the eighth principle. Today, there are about 20 congregations that have done so, and a number of congregations will be voting on it in the coming weeks. The eighth principle is about co-creating a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by actively dismantling racism and oppression. We're talking about making this part of our spiritual journey, And there's more to learning what it is to be a community of communities. We don't know the answer yet. We are on this journey, we're on the trail. We cannot, though, build the beloved community unless we are dismantling racism, sexism, ableism, heterosexism, ageism, and other beliefs and practices that relegate some people to the margins and infer dominance for others. Reverend David H. Eaton was the minister of my church while I was growing up. He was our first African-American minister who served for 23 years. And he said, and I quote, "The first society that builds its priorities on the disinherited will be the first universal society," end quote. We have a ways to go. As things around us are changing right now, we can begin to reimagine our design. We have a chance now to do something different. We can build structures that are designed for equality by building churches around and for groups of people that are seeking belonging in a progressive religious community. And if we're paying attention to the needs and interests of communities as we journey together, we will be changed as more people find connection with us and we become a part of their journey. We are always becoming. The life of our church is just a chance to grow a community that can help more people to take down walls as they become more interconnected. Mahatma Gandhi said, and I quote, "The true measure of any society can be found in how it treats its most vulnerable members," end quote. If we identify ourselves as a community of communities, and if we embrace all of our principles, including the eighth principle, then we will live our days knowing what the Aloha spirit is conveying, knowing what Dr. Martin Luther King knew, and what Gandhi and Black Elk and David Eaton and the Maasai warriors knew about our interconnected web of life. And we will more fully live into the promise of Unitarian Universalism and our values and principles. May it be so. Amen.